October 8, 1980, Day 12 of filming Borderline. In El Paso, Texas, Charles Bronson had been on set since 5 a.m., ready to work. His co-star, a rising young actor named Derek Matthews, cast as his partner, was supposed to arrive at 6 a.m. for makeup. He showed up at 9:30 a.m., drunk. This was the third time in 12 days Derek had arrived late, unprepared, or intoxicated. The crew was frustrated. The director was losing patience. But they were stuck. Derek had a significant role. They would already shot scenes with him. Replacing him would cost time and money. Charles said nothing. He just watched Derek stumble through the morning, flubbing lines, missing marks, wasting everyone's time. At 2 p.m., they were shooting a two-person dialogue scene. Derek was so incoherent he could not remember a 3-line exchange that would rehearse that morning. On the 7th take, Charles stopped mid-scene, turned to the director, and said 5 words that ended Derek Matthews' career. "I will not work with him." What happened next became legendary in Hollywood, not for the drama, but for how swiftly and completely Charles Bronson could end someone's professional life with absolute calm and zero tolerance for disrespect. This is the untold story of the actor Charles fired mid-scene, and why Bronson will not work with him became a career death sentence in 1980s action cinema. Derek Matthews was 28 years old in 1980, with 3 years of steady work in supporting roles. He was talented when sober, charismatic on screen, and had the look studios wanted: square-jawed, athletic, conventionally handsome. He would be cast in Borderline as the younger partner to Charles's veteran Border Patrol agent, a role that could elevate him to leading man status. But Derek had a problem that was increasingly common in late 1970s, early 1980s Hollywood: cocaine and alcohol. The party culture was rampant, and Derek had dove in headfirst. What started as recreational use had become dependency. By the time Borderline began filming, Derek was using daily. The warning signs appeared immediately. Day 1, Derek showed up on time, but clearly hungover. Day 3, he was an hour late. Day 5, he forgot his lines repeatedly and blamed the script. Day 7, he arrived visibly intoxicated and had to be sent back to his trailer to recover. The director, Gerald Friedman, tried to manage it quietly. He adjusted the shooting schedule, filming Derek's scenes in the afternoon instead of morning to give him time to sober up. He had assistants check on Derek hourly. He even brought in the studio's wellness consultant, Hollywood code for someone who helps actors function through their addictions long enough to finish productions. Nothing worked. Derek's behavior got worse, not better. Charles noticed everything but said nothing. He showed up prepared, hit his marks, delivered his lines, and watched his co-star disintegrate. The crew whispered that Charles was angry, that eventually he would explode. But he did not explode. He just observed, waiting. By day 12, the production was 3 days behind schedule, and almost all the delays were directly attributable to Derek. The crew's patience had evaporated. Even Derek's own stand-in, a young actor who usually defended him, had started openly criticizing him. That afternoon's scene was simple: Charles and Derek's characters sitting in a car on stakeout, discussing the case they were working. 4 pages of dialogue, mostly exposition. They would rehearsed it that morning, and Eric had seemed fine, tired but functional. But when cameras rolled at 2 p.m., Derek was a mess. His words slurred. He confused his character's name with his own. He leaned against the car door like he might pass out. Take 1. Derek forgot his first line. Take 2. Derek said the line but stared blankly when Charles responded, clearly not listening. Take 3. Derek started his dialogue from the middle of the scene instead of the beginning. Take 4. Derek laughed inappropriately during a serious moment. Take 5. Derek asked what scene they were shooting. Take 6. Derek's eyes closed mid-sentence. On take 7, Charles delivered his line, waited for Derek's response, and got nothing. Derek was staring out the car window, not even pretending to be present. Charles turned to look at Derek. Then he opened the car door, stepped out, and walked directly to where Gerald was standing behind the monitors. "I will not work with him," Charles said quietly. Gerald blinked. "Charles, I know this is frustrating." "I'm not frustrated. I'm done. That man is wasting everyone's time. The crew's been here since 5 this morning. They deserve better. I deserve better. Either he is off this production by tomorrow, or I am. Charles, we've already shot 6 days with him. If we replace him now, then you will have to reshoot those 6 days with someone else. Or you will release a film where half the scenes do not match because you had to work around his absence. Your choice. But I will not spend another day working with someone who has this little respect for the craft and this little consideration for everyone else's time." Gerald looked past Charles to the car, where Derek was still sitting, oblivious to the conversation happening 30 feet away. "Let me talk to the studio. You have until tomorrow morning. If he is still on this set when I arrive, I am gone." Charles went to his trailer. The crew, who'd witnessed the exchange, stood in stunned silence. In 12 years of working together, many of them had never seen Charles issue an ultimatum like this. Gerald called the studio executives. The conversation was brief and brutal. Replacing Derek would cost approximately $200,000, reshooting his scenes, recasting, extending the production schedule. But losing Charles Bronson would cost the entire film. Borderline was being financed based on his name. Without Charles, there was no movie. The executives told Gerald to fire Derek immediately. At 4 p.m., Derek was called to the production office. He entered smiling, seemingly unaware of what was coming. "Derek, we are releasing you from the production," Gerald said simply. Derek's smile faded. "What? What?" "Your behavior has been unprofessional and has caused significant delays. We are recasting your role. You cannot do that. I have a contract. Your contract has a professionalism clause. You have violated it repeatedly. You are fired. Your things will be sent to your hotel. We'll need you off the property within the hour." Derek's face went through several emotions: confusion, anger, denial. "This is Charles, is not it? He complained about me. This is about your behavior, not about Charles. But, yes, Charles made it clear he will not continue working with you. He cannot do that. He cannot just fire people. He did not fire you. I did. But he gave me an ultimatum, you or him. And Derek, Charles Bronson, is this film. You are a supporting actor who has been late, drunk, and unprepared for 12 straight days. This is not a difficult decision." Derek stood up, his face red. "This is bullshit. I am going to talk to Charles." "No, you are not. You are going to leave this property immediately. If you attempt to contact Charles or interfere with this production in any way, we will pursue legal action for breach of contract. Do you understand?" Derek understood. He left the production office, into his trailer, grabbed his personal items, and was escorted off the lot by security. By 6 p.m., Derek Matthews' career in Hollywood was effectively over. The next morning, a new actor arrived on set, Ed Harris, relatively unknown at the time, who had been cast overnight as Derek's replacement. Charles greeted him professionally. They ran through the scenes, and production continued. Over the next 2 weeks, they reshot all of Derek's scenes with Ed Harris. The production wrapped only 1 week behind the original schedule, less delay than Derek had already caused. Borderline was released in 1980 to modest reviews and box office. Ed Harris's performance was noted as solid, bringing quiet intensity to the role. Nobody who saw the finished film knew about Derek Matthews or the mid-production firing. But in Hollywood, everyone knew. The story spread quickly. Charles Bronson had fired a co-star mid-production. The details varied, depending on who told it, but the core message was consistent. Do not waste Charles Bronson's time. Do not show up unprepared. Do not disrespect the process. For Derek Matthews, the consequences were immediate and severe. His agent dropped him. Casting directors stopped returning his calls. The few auditions he did get, he would walk into the room and see the casting director's face change when they recognized him. "Oh, you are the guy Bronson would not work with." In Hollywood's tight-knit action film community of the 1980s, that label was a career killer. Charles Bronson was respected, not just for his box office draw, but for his professionalism. If Charles refused to work with someone, the assumption was that person deserved it. Derek tried to rebuild his career. He did a few small roles in low-budget films. He worked in dinner theater. He taught acting classes, but he never got back to the level he would been at before Borderline. In 1987, Derek gave a bitter interview to a film magazine. "Charles Bronson destroyed my career over being late a few times. He is a hypocrite who talks about respect, but does not give second chances." The interviewer asked if Derek had been intoxicated during filming. Derek refused to answer directly. "I was going through some personal issues. I needed help, not judgment." Charles decided I was not worth the trouble and threw me away. When Charles was asked about the incident years later, his response was characteristically brief. "I do not work with people who do not take the work seriously." If you are not prepared, if you are not professional, if you waste everyone's time, you are done. That is not being harsh. That is having standards. Do you regret how it affected Derek Matthews' career? I regret that he chose to behave the way he did. Everything that happened after was a consequence of his choices, not mine. The crew members who had been on Borderline almost universally supported Charles's decision. The script supervisor, Linda Hayes, gave an interview in 2005. Derek was a disaster. We all knew it. But nobody had the power or courage to do anything until Charles put his foot down. People act like Charles was cruel, but you know who was cruel? Derek. Derek was cruel to the crew who would have been up since before dawn, waiting for him to show up. Derek was cruel to the makeup artists who had to deal with him drunk and belligerent. Derek was cruel to everyone who was trying to do their jobs professionally, while he coasted on talent and charm. Charles ended that, and yes, it ended Derek's career. But maybe that is what needed to happen. Maybe some people need to face real consequences before they will address their problems. Ed Harris, who would replace Derek, was asked about the situation in a 1990 interview. "I got a call at 10 p.m. asking if I could start filming the next morning. They explained the situation. Actor fired for unprofessional behavior. Need immediate replacement. I said yes. When I got to set, Charles was welcoming and professional. We had good chemistry. The role was not huge, but it was a solid opportunity. Years later, people would ask me about taking Derek Matthews' role. I did not take anything. He lost it through his own actions. Charles did not fire Derek to give me an opportunity. He fired Derek because Derek had become impossible to work with. I just happened to benefit from it." The Borderline incident established a pattern that would define Charles's later career. He had zero tolerance for unprofessionalism, and he had enough power to enforce that standard. Actors who worked with Charles knew, be on time, know your lines, respect the crew, violate those rules, and you were done. This reputation was not universally loved. Some saw it as inflexible, as Charles being difficult, but most working actors appreciated it. Sets with Charles ran smoothly because everyone knew the expectations. A character actor who had worked with Charles on 3 films said in 2000, Charles did not tolerate prima donna behavior because he was not a prima donna. He showed up early, knew everyone's names, treated the craft services people with the same respect as the director, and he expected others to do the same. If you could not handle that basic level of professionalism, you did not belong on his set. Derek Matthews died in 1998 at age 46 from cirrhosis of the liver, a consequence of the alcohol dependency that had destroyed his career 18 years earlier. His obituary in Variety mentioned his early promise and his struggles with addiction. It did not mention Borderline or Charles Bronson. But in the comments section of the online obituary, several former crew members shared their memories. Most expressed sadness at Derek's death and his unfulfilled potential. But several also noted that the Borderline firing might have been the wake-up call Derek needed if he would been willing to hear it. One comment read, "I worked on Borderline." Derek was talented, but troubled. Charles Bronson gave him 12 days to get it together. 12 days of accommodation, adjusted schedules, and patience. When Derek still could not or would not be professional, Charles ended it. Some people said Charles was cruel. I think he was clear. And sometimes clarity is the kindest thing you can offer someone who is drowning. R.I.P. Derek. October 8, 1980. An actor showed up drunk for the 3rd time in 12 days. October 8, 1980. Charles Bronson said 5 words. I will not work with him. October 8, 1980. A career ended, not with drama or violence, but with the simple withdrawal of Charles Bronson's willingness to continue. No second chances, no negotiations, just the cold reality that if you waste Charles Bronson's time, you lose the privilege of his presence. Was it harsh? Maybe. Was it fair? Depends who you ask. But it was consistent with who Charles was, a man who valued professionalism, respected other people's time, and refused to enable behavior that disrespected the craft. Derek Matthews could have been a star. He had the talent, the look, the opportunity, but he chose substances over work. He chose ego over preparation. He chose to show up late and drunk, rather than early and ready, and Charles Bronson chose not to tolerate it. That is not Hollywood vindictiveness. That is just consequences. The kind of consequences that should exist in any professional environment, but often do not because people with power enable bad behavior rather than confronting it. Charles confronted it with 5 calm words that destroyed a career. I will not work with him. The most devastating sentence in 1980s Hollywood, not because Charles Bronson was cruel, but because Charles Bronson was respected, and when a respected man says you are not worth his time, everyone listens.